the title of the study is Effects in Rats of Adolescent Exposure to Cannabis Smoke or THC on Emotional Behavior and Cognitive Function in Adulthood. So basically what they did was they tested that. They had 2 experiments, one testing cannabis smoke against a placebo, and then one with just pure THC extract. What was another part of the...
They also separated or tried to see the difference between males and females.
Yeah.
So they did it all on rats. And what they ended up doing was that they took rats that were supposedly in their adolescent phases to try to correlate it better. And yeah, they separated into groups or hordes for each experiment.
Yeah, so they were all randomly assigned to different ones, and then I think they had equal numbers of males and females in each condition in the cannabis smoke, placebo smoke, and THC. If I remember correctly.
Well, they had different numbers for each
Yeah,
experiment.
but but the numbers within the experiment type were equally male and female. But they had they had more in the was it THC condition?
And the cannabis smoke exposure.
Yeah.
So if we back up a little, to test the exposure of cannabis in adulthood, they used specific types of experiments, including sucrose preference, force swim, and cognitive function and object recognition. And then if we want to define those.
Yeah, so with like the force swim being that they were placed in a tank of water and forced to swim until they measured the length of time that it took for them to become immobile. And also, there was another measure that they used.
Climbing.
Yeah, climbing motion, so trying to go upwards and like swing around. Horizontal movements. And then like the sucrose test was whether they had a preference for sucrose, water, or not. As a result of after taking cannabis smoke or the THC. And then the novel object recognition test, that was their only cognitive test. And they had to like recognize new objects, and then like when they were familiar with an object, and then their ability to recognize a new one.
So they also had elevated plus maze and had one other, right?
Large open field.
Yeah.
So that one was, it's like pretty standard for anxiety, is they just put them in a field and make them run around and see how they run around. And the elevated plus mazes, they measured how frequently they enter the different arms. So 2 of them were closed with walls and 2 of them were open, so it was just, you could see that it was elevated. And measure how many times they went out onto the arms and how many times they went onto the open arms versus the closed arms. That one was just really cool. I don't think we talked about that in class.
Right.
I don't remember it, so.
So the basic results, very, very basic results, were that there were some sex differences, but they didn't see any like significant adverse effects for like either of the groups.
Yeah, there was not really a difference between any of them. Like they all performed in a very similar way, except for the sex differences, which was interesting and like not expected, honestly. I at least expected some difference between like
yeah, you'd expect
placebo.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting, especially like I also in particular like I thought there was gonna be more differences between the smoke and the straight THC. And that there wasn't any. It was really interesting. That was unexpected.
Yeah, because the way they described it, the smoking was basically like by the machine.
Yeah.
While the THC was like injected into them.
Yeah.
So.
I thought there was like, and the THC was so strong.
Yeah.
Like they talked about how in the THC condition, the like levels of THC in their plasma was 10 to 100 times stronger than it would be for, like, if somebody was doing it recreationally.
Yeah, especially because humans inhale rather than inject.
Yeah.
Yeah.
THC.
But they also mentioned that, like, the levels of THC in their plasma after smoking it was on the lowest, like the lower end of what's common for humans.
Yep, low to middle.
Yeah. So I was like, it was interesting that, like, even though there was, like, very, very low when smoking and very, very high with the just pure THC, there still wasn't really any difference.
Yeah.
That was weird.
For the sex differences too, I was wondering if maybe females in rats too were more susceptible to anxiety levels, high or low, and that had to do with the differences they found with the THC and the smoke.
Yeah.
Just like before the smoking even. If that had to do with the results at all.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Cause like for some of the tests they had, like, they were more anxious than the males,
Yeah.
but for most of them they were either as or less anxious.
Yeah.
Which was, yeah. I wonder if there's like a genetic tendency to, like, towards or away from anxiety.
That's what I was wondering too.
Yeah. That was something to look into for long Evans rats.
Yep.
And then if the females are more likely to be anxious, or less likely to be anxious when they take things that suppress that anxiety, anxiolytics, then they are even less. So yeah, they didn't really find anything. Which is unfortunate because they went through, like, a lot of effort. It looked like there was a lot done here.
I mean, they didn't find what they were looking for. They
Yeah.
did find things, it's
Yeah.
just not what they set out to do.
Yeah. Well, they found, like, main effects between gender. They found, like, one of the tests or two of the tests had, like, a cross interaction, but, like, not really strong.
Yeah.
It was, like, trends.
It was in the experiment one where there was no main effects on exposure conditions. It was just like the weight difference.
Yeah, yeah.
And then experiment two was that there was a significant difference on the exposure between, like, when they enter the center zone and when they don't.
So which test is that?
It's
Right.
the cannabis smoke.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
And those are two different experiments.
Yeah. And, like, I know in the THC one for the sucrose and preference enforcement test, there was, like, a trend towards an interaction, but it wasn't actually there yet. And same for, like, the nonologic recognition. There was, like, a lot of, they mentioned the trend towards a interaction, but no actual interaction for a lot of them. It was mostly main effects. With the exception of the cannabis smoke in the open field test, which was interesting. I thought there was gonna be more interacting, but there's gonna be more effects in general.
I mean, that is one of the things that we were talking about. Like, maybe we could have seen more if they did different, like, other tests for the cognitive and for the depression thing. Because while they did do a couple for anxiety, it just kind of, like, was unbalanced, I feel.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, I definitely think it was unbalanced. Since there were, like, what, 4 out of 5 of the tests were emotional regulation, and of those 4, 3 of them were anxiety. And then there was 1 cognitive and 1 depression, and that was, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, and that was it.
Yeah.
So I think.
So maybe they could have been more, but we just didn't need it.
Plus, like, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know a lot of stoners who are like, I'm gonna swim while high, just willingly just keep going at it. Like, of course you're gonna stop swimming. So I think they could have done a better, like, another test for depression on top of that one would have been good.
I think they also had a fairly small sample size.
Yeah.
And the interesting part about using the different type of rat really stuck out to me too, where typical procedure in this sense, they used
The Sprague-Dawson.
Yep, and then in this one they used Long Evans. And they don't really say why.
Yeah, they just
No.
was like, yeah, we did this instead, and I was like, I found myself asking like, but the spragdocins are like, that's what have been used in prior research, that you're basing this experiment off of, like every experiment has used rats, so why did you just say no and use the log evidence? Like, I mean, I'm sure, like, I'm not sure, but I'm like, would be willing to bet that it was something to do with like, they were just easier to come by and cheaper.
Sure.
But then, like, if that was the case, then why were there only like 40 to a condition?
Yeah.
And then how they almost like doubled it for the different experiments. Like for the first one there was like 72, like still the same proportion of male and female, but then on the second one there was only 40.
Yeah,
So
that was
it was just like
like not equal and not very weighty. Like, I don't really know the like standard for animal versus for like, I know for human you usually want to have like 75 in a condition, and that's like in one condition, so 150 in the whole experiment.
Yeah.
And so to me, reading that they had 72 in one experiment, I was like, and 40 in one, I was like, that's less people than I had in my research methods experiment.
Right. And then experiment 1 being cannabis smoke exposure. And an interesting part about that too was that they would house rats together, and then they began to fight, and so they had to switch that up and put them in separate housing. And that, you know, it might not have had a significant effect on their study, but I'm sure it.
I would like,
some.
yeah, because I mean rats are pretty social, and so being like taking this drug when they're not like with the rats. I mean, I'm glad that they separated them because like fighting would have also been bad. But also like I want to know why they started fighting. Like what? Why was that their response?
Yeah. Was it just like something with the rats in particular, or was it like the actual smoking that they were inhaling, or like?
Yeah, but like, I think there definitely could have been something amiss with the fact that they were alone for the exposure period.
Yeah. Well, and they started it together, so they kept the experiment going rather than starting over, which is what I would have expected.
Yeah, I would.
They would start over and then separated them in housing.
Yeah, like start with the new experiment starting with them having been separated for a certain period of time instead of like.
Which they did do an experiment too, which with the THC administration.
Yeah.
Except that they did like group them by 2 instead, because in the first one they grouped them by 3 in the beginning, and then they stopped when they started fighting. And then the second one, I guess, to keep it consistent, but they grouped them by 2 in the cage for the first phase, and then they separated them. Which, I mean, I guess makes sense if you're going for consistency, but it's like kind of.
It's still
like.
I would just like start it over and like then start with them having been separated instead of like it's close enough.
Yeah.
What we're taught from stage 1 in this degree plan is always keep it consistent.
Yeah.
And then they're like, it went kind of amiss, but we just kept going.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting.
Which is like going amiss is one thing because like you can just like they compensated for it. They did in the second one start them out in groups and then separate them so that it did match.
With different numbers in the groups.
That is a problem, and the fact that they could have, because then that they were starting to fight after just like the very beginning of the study, they could have just like. I feel like they should have just restarted because the fighting is such an unexpected response, and like with the rats being such social creatures, I feel like having them together and then apart would have added more stress, and then that would have affected their results.
Honestly, since they didn't mention any fighting between when they paired 2 in a cage, maybe it was just like the number in that cage too. Because if they feel like they're too cramped, they might start fighting.
Yeah.
So maybe it was that thing, but who knows?
I think the fact that we're asking these questions means something is flawed.
Yeah. The things could have been done in a different way. I think that would have led to fewer, or like not fewer, but like could definitely have affected the results in a way that led them to find nothing. In the exposure anyway.
Well, especially when you're assessing anxiety.
Yeah.
There's a stress response.
Yeah. And so like, oh yes, I know what will make them like be totally fine is if we stress them out.
Yeah, right.
And then they will score as normally. Yes. You know. But then.
And then another thing that they didn't really say where they got from was like the amount of like the THC and cannabis, like CBD and CBN that the smoke had.
Yeah.
So they say that it came from like analytical data that it was accompanying the cigarettes, but they didn't really mention like from where, from whom, like what data they were collecting it from.
Yeah, I think
So
I read that as like this is what they were reporting what was in the data. Like the cigarettes came with a like these has this
Okay.
much in it
Okay.
of each
So
thing.
like just from the package,
Yeah.
basically.
I want to know why that was the cigarettes that they chose to use because that's. I mean I don't know a lot about weed, but I feel like I've heard the presence of CBD being something that people like seek out a lot, and the fact that there was 0 CBD tested in this whole test, especially when they mentioned like maybe a reason that THC versus cannabis smoke affects people differently is because cannabis smoke has like other cannabinoids in it, but then they try to find like the cigarette that has it's like mostly THC with trace amounts of other cannabinoids, and I'm like, but that's not what you're studying. There's,
If they want to make it analogous to what humans do,
yeah,
it wasn't quite there.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think
It was
would have been.
close.
It was definitely close. I think it was closer than like other experiments on
Yeah.
effective from adolescence to adulthood. I think it would have been cool for them to do a third experiment with like if the experiment 3 being with cannabis smoke, but it's like 50-50 THC and CBD
That's
in the
interesting.
smoke.
Yeah.
I didn't think of
Because then they could test like is it the THC in the smoke form that's causing differences, or the pure form, or is it the interaction between THC and the other big common cannabinoid
That's a good
CBD?
idea.
Because maybe that's it. Like that was my first thought when I was reading through. I was like, they're gonna test to see if like CBD and THC, if smoked, have that change in effect. But then they didn't, and I was like, they're just testing 2 different forms of ingesting THC, which is still neat,
Yes.
definitely. But I don't think it's the most that they could have done. Yeah.
So they talked a lot about other studies that they brought into this too. And I appreciated that they brought up a couple times that they did contrast those studies, but also used them as support for their arguments. Some of them is that they observed only a few and small effects of either cannabis or THC exposure on the behavioral test, so I'm wondering what you guys think of that.
Yeah, I remember where that was. I'm quite proud of the paper.
In the discussion.
Yeah. Let me see, because I'm trying to remember what studies that they were comparing and contrasting to. Rubino.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. That like, I really liked that they pulled in like studies that were in like contradicting
Yes.
to them. I
Yeah.
always sort of look when I read papers and like all of their sources just saying like supporting them, because that's like good that you have a lot of sources supporting them, but also it feels sort of biased. So I like that there was like that they included that sort of they found something different than we found, and like but here's potentially why.
But they were still able to like grow from previous experiments.
Yeah, like they mentioned that in the beginning too, how like because of the inconsistency in past research, that's one of the reasons why they wanted to do this. You know, because they didn't know like, oh, does cannabis actually or THC actually affect these or not? Like, what are the because there's a lot of different ones that they mentioned in the beginning. The interesting one I found from the beginning, sorry, this is kind of like going off.
Really good.
Like, it was the one about how one past research found that IQ points dropped by like 8 points or something. That was super specific. They said like,
I was like,
yeah. I was just like, oh, this might be in relation to like the smoking or something like that, and it was just okay. Alright.
They do say, you know,
So.
that's not supported
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. It was just like, it was something interesting that they brought into it.
Yeah.
'Cause, you know, it was just kind of like, okay, maybe it doesn't affect it to this level, because yeah, like you said, it's not supportive, but probably does have some sort of effect on the cognitive side, which is why we're gonna also test it.
There's a reason they're
Yeah.
looking
So,
at it.
Yeah.
Another interesting part that I found in relation to that was that previous studies found causal effects, which
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not. So previous studies were saying like, oh, the cause of behavior like anxiety and depression comes from THC. Rather, this study was really looking at like, it's actually the depressed and anxiety level people that have that
Yeah.
seek out the THC.
Yeah. Like I thought I was. Yeah, they're mentioning that older studies had like think that like using cannabis when you're young is going to lead to you having these problems. I was just like, is it really though?
Right.
I think that like I really really appreciated how at the end they were like, and yes, something that we
brought
like
that back.
have to talk about is like the tendency of people who use cannabis when they're in adolescence.
Yeah.
Why might that be? Perhaps is it because they are like dealing with anxiety and depression and they're using this to like self-treat their symptoms, and then that could lead to higher levels of depression and anxiety in adulthood, like, or to diagnosis in adulthood, because you're not diagnosed in your adolescence, but then you are later.
Yeah, they kind of like reversed it from the beginning, which makes sense because they do mention like, oh, this is what happened before, but like more recent stuff suggests this thing now.
Yeah.
So.
And then like
Yeah.
this
That
study.
was a good thing to have, and I agree.
I was like, yeah. And then like they mentioned the self sort of selecting, like the self-fulfilling prophecy of people who
In
like
humans.
seek this out. That's not something that would be easily studyable in rats.
Right.
Because rats don't choose to ingest cannabis smoke.
Yeah.
Or inject it.
Yeah. They also
Yeah.
mentioned that it's also analogous with frequent or with psychiatric disorders or environmental stressors, which rats aren't going to be like, I'm stressed, I need weed.
Yeah.
that's not going to go hand in hand
Yeah.
either.
Or like we could potentially test that for like edible or like oral consumption, but not really because like rats just aren't. They're not gonna smoke.
Not my choice.
Yeah. So that was. Yeah, I feel like it's something that like I don't know how we can study like the effect of choosing to consume cannabis.
I don't know that
We couldn't do that.
That would be really interesting.
We couldn't do it ethically.
Yeah.
It would be really cool, but
Ethic issues.
Yeah, just like little things. But
yeah, and that's another thing actually that they put emphasis on. They wanted to make sure the readers knew that the rats were being treated well.
Yeah.
Basically,
Oh.
like they mentioned how they're
In
all
every
housed in
aspect.
they're all housed in these nice little like cage things, like little house. Yeah.
Kept up to food and
Yeah, they had a schedule. You
after
know.
after they were put in the swim test, each rat was removed and
With a
put in the
like-
towel. And I was like, I hope so. And maybe one of like, what experiments have you seen that where they weren't? They were just left to be cold. So I thought that was like
It's kind of cute.
really cute. Well, like and doing like what they could to like alleviate any stressful symptoms before moving on to the next test. Since like if I remember correctly, all the rats did all of them, obviously in randomized order, but yeah. So like if you went like, oh yes, you just finished before swim test, time to do an anxiety test without anything, that would have been.
Just like let's just go.
No, like I'm glad that they treated the rats well. I'm still like peeved about them using Long Evans rats
Right.
instead of Spike Dawson.
There's no logic that they mention for using that.
They just like, we did this, by the way. Like,
We did this one pretty large and substantial
Yeah.
difference from every other study.
yeah, they were like, by the way, like every other study uses these other kinds of rats, and we did this instead, and that may have affected our results. And I'm
Yeah, they
You
mentioned
think?
that too.
like, they're like, a pretty significant option is like, maybe this affected it. I'm like, maybe? An entirely different kind of rat that is less prone to anxiety
Yeah.
might have affected your results. Like they have like less corticosterone, whatever it is.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, so like,
Yeah.
hmm.
An interesting choice.
Yeah, I was like, what? You should have.
At least tell us why.
Yeah, it's like
At least
if you,
tell us
even
why.
if it's just like because Long Evans wraps were cheaper and we couldn't afford the
Yeah.
Sprague Dawson, I would have liked to just know that
Yeah.
as opposed to we did this. Bye. Like,
It probably affected the results.
we're like,
Who knows?
yeah, probably. And now it's gonna be like harder to redo this with the Sprague Dawson rats just because like it's already been done. But yeah, yeah. It's so. Yeah. And then like the way that they like in the introduction they really stress like cognitive function,
Yeah.
and then they didn't like
Then it was just kind of like,
Come
they
back to
didn't
it.
yeah.
we
Even
did
in
this one
discussion.
test, you know.
Yeah, they were just
Yeah.
like they mentioned that like also even though we used a lot of tests, only one of them was cognitive, and that may have affected results. Anyway, moving on, and I'm like, but
But that would have been cool to see.
yeah,
Also,
like
it's in your title.
I would, yeah, it's like if you're gonna put such an emphasis on it in the first part of the study, but then not really do anything with it in the measures and the results in the discussion, like edit your intro so that it doesn't have this much of stress on their cognitive function, because like. I was really looking forward to seeing like
Yeah.
the
It
Moore's
looked-
water maids type situation where they like tested their spatial learning or whatever, but then they didn't. They just had knowledge, which was cool,
Mhm.
but they
Yeah.
could have done more.
They just seem to emphasize more on the anxiety part out of
Mhm.
everything, you
Yeah.
know, because like they actually even went into more like details of what like happened between the sexes on
Yeah.
this the anxiety test rather than like the cognitive or the depression one.
Yeah, the
So-
foursome test, and the secret weapons, also. And
But
then
even-
another question for me.
But the ones that were not anxiety assessing were not conclusive either. There were no
Yeah.
effects or significant effects.
For any of it.
No,
Yeah.
there was no leniency to either direction.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there was like in the cannabis smoke with the secret reference and foursome, there was slight difference between sexes, and like that was it.
But
Yeah.
the rest had like significant
They were, like,
differences in
Yeah.
the sexes.
Yeah.
It was just like, yeah, and then one of the main things that's talked about was like the weight difference. Like at the beginning, they weighed different. Like males weighed more, and at the end, they weighed more. Like the significant portion was different, but like it still was like parallel.
Yeah.
So
They
it's
did
just-
allude to that being a THC issue.
Yeah, they were pretty sure this is like. So yeah, I thought it was a really interesting paper. I think they were headed in a really good direction.
Yeah.
Like it was a good starting point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was a really
It was good.
easy to read paper too.
Yes.
You totally
It was,
understood
yeah.
what they were saying.
Yeah.
That was something like I found with some like neuroscience papers have been like they're not really clear, or they're written for people who like have a huge extensive background in this, and like but this one is like really clear. I like how they explained all of their measures instead of just
Yeah.
listing them,
Yeah.
which I've run across a lot. They're like, we did these 6 measures anyway, moving on. And I'm like,
Right.
but what are they?
Yeah. Like they
Um,
gave us a lot of details, but they're all relevant. So
Mhm.
it was
Yeah.
just
There wasn't any part of this that I was just like, why are you including this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be really cool to see where they go from here, because I know you
Mhm.
mentioned the third experiment would be really cool to look at. We also talked about
You're doing it with the Sprague Dawson.
yeah.
Like, I think that would be
Very
really
effective,
interesting to go see. I
yeah.
think
And
this
then
is
the
a really,
number of rats in the houses.
yeah. I think this is something that people could use to like jump off of, to
Definitely.
like
Yeah.
go more
Yeah.
into like
It's a great starting point.
Yeah.
finding
Number
a
of
link.
rats in general should just be
Yeah.
increased.
Yeah.
So-
But yeah, I think this is a really I really liked reading this article. I thought it was really fascinating.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like tweaking it a little bit would just
Yeah.
bump it up.
One of the to go see if somebody's like done work off of this one in particular.
Mhm.
Although it was only published in May, but like I want to keep an eye out.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's really recent. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I don't like reading old things.
Yeah.
Good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.